following lesson video will not be graded or take the place of classroom assignments. These are merely supplemental lessons for students to continue their learning during school closure. Today, we're going to learn more about recording audio/instruments into Ableton Live. To read the list, our objective is learn more about audio recording, better understanding of how to operate and record, values and techniques of audio routing, arming tracks to record on Ableton and understanding how to obtain clean signals, understanding how to record instruments or through microphone. Besides working on a beat or writing a song using loops and MIDI, there are other ways to make music, and it is by recording instruments. In this lesson, I'll be demonstrating how to record into Ableton and settings to use it. For this lesson, you will need Ableton, maybe an instrument or a microphone. If you are choosing an instrument, hopefully you are having some sort of like a TRS or a 1/4 inch like a plug-in or some sort of like an XLR output on the instrument that you're about to record. Or you can just do an old traditional with a microphone. I'll be going over both of the techniques, and specifically we're going to be recording an instrument today. And the third thing you'll need is an audio capture card. It can be whichever you like, as long as it has a USB interface and somehow it has ports for you to plug in and record. So fourth thing is, as I mentioned earlier, TSR, or aka 1/4 inch, or XLR plugs, depending on what kind of microphone you're using or an instrument that you're using. The fifth thing that we need are studio speakers or headphones, some sort of sound system that you can reference your track to or as you record it. If you're not capable of having access to studio monitors, you can still definitely achieve the same type of work through headphones, so don't worry. Okay. Now I'm going to be demonstrating the gear that I'll be using today. I'll make it pretty simple, and I'll be using my FFphone SG, and through the 1/4 inch I'll be recording through my audio interface, and it'll be picking up signals, and we're going to be recording more on Ableton. Now I'll switch over to the view where I show you my audio interface and explain more about that. Alright, so I'm going to explain a little bit about my audio interface and audio card. This is what I use. It's called a big knob, and the reason why I choose this is because, as you can see in the background, I have two different types of monitors, and in order to use it, you need to have some sort of like a splitter and just different ways to do different monitors. So more or less, we need to discuss more about the inputs and the outputs. So here are my inputs. You can actually use both TRS or like an XLR. Most of microphones and guitars actually going through here. As I shown you earlier with the guitar jack, it's a TRS, which could be a 1/4 inch, and you just kind of put that in there. Or if you have a microphone, you probably use an XLR, and they go in here. Here's the front of the interface. You can probably see it better now. So this controls the volume, and this shows which monitor speakers I'm using. But more importantly, we're going to be paying attention to this side. Just you can either split to one stereo into this one, or they split into two different ones, the left and right. And I would press this to monitor my vocals or instruments that I'm recording. But yeah, that's like the basics of it. And also what's really important is this part. Audio interface nowadays are pretty well compact and complex for the price of like, $100 to $200. Some of them come with a built-in USB audio drive, which is really awesome because you don't ever have to think about like how to route your audio in there, and this is like the most modern technique. So less about what this actually does and more about how to record this thing. But at the end of it, you need to get yourself one of these audio interface. So here's another, as an example. I used to use this really long time ago, and I've been using it for years. So this one now, also to explain over, it's got both, oh man, there's left and right, and you can each control its gain and volume through this. And also, as you can see, this also has the USB port, which is exactly like the modern technique. And this is the power And also, you can oh, here's the actual input. Those were the outputs that I was looking at. So here's the input of left and right, or you can use both of it if you want to do stereo recordings. But yeah, so get yourself one of these. If you don't have them, the best bet you got is like an aux plug in to your computer, and then maybe you can get like a converting wire that kind of like helps you put your either your microphone or whichever instrument that you're trying to use. Let's go over the audio routing preferences on Ableton. As you see here on my desktop, I have Ableton open along with the options of the preferences. So starting from the top of the audio tab, we're going to look at the audio devices. To begin, driver type should always be MME/DirectX unless you want to do more complex things, and then you would use the option of the ASIO. And for Macs, it'll be the core audio. And my audio input devices, for my instance, I have the line in, which is the Big Knob Studio that I have. That's the focus. I'm sorry. That's the audio interface that I have. And if your audio driver is a little different, that's fine. Just make sure to indicate that inside the audio input devices. So audio output devices, because my Mackie Big Knob Studio is a monitor and an audio interface and an output. That's the output device that I'm setting, which will send the audio directly to my studio monitors. And if you just hit the drop down menu, you can recognize which one is that you're trying to play. For instances about people who are listening to direct audio through their audio jack on your either on your computer or laptop, you should be able to find that as well. So input configuration, just simply this will show up and make sure both of these are turned on. And the outputs also, it might be a little different depending on what kind of audio card that you're using, but for mine it's a little simple, and we make sure everything's on. If you're using a USB microphone or any other recording device with its own USB device, it should also show up on the input devices. And if it's also like a speaker USB thing that can connect into your computer, it should also show up on your output devices as well. Your sample rate should be set to default at 44/100. And rest of the settings, you shouldn't have to mess with it so much. Moving on, latency latency is a huge tool to your productions. As an example, I'm sure some of you had an experience of a lag when you were pressing on a button or to play. That delay has everything to do with latency, and latency is what sets the whole lag and the delays that you're experiencing. Setting your latency is a tool you can use and customize for better performance to your CPU. In short words, it means manually optimizes your computer for better efficiency. When previewing your track or working on a mix, and your processor isn't giving enough power, higher latency would be optimal. When recording, it's best to start with low latency number and increase its number if you're having some sort of CPU issues. So another example that I can give here is, let's go ahead and preview some sounds with the latency. I'll go ahead and find some samples, and maybe we can find some loops here. Oh, for right now, I am using my headphones, so I'm going to, oh, wrong one. I'm going to switch this device to USB. Seems pretty good right now. It seems like it's not having so much issues, but if I were to decrease the output buffer size, it'll probably sound really gritty, like. There's a little bit of sound that's present. Let's put it lower. So that's most likely what will happen. But if you're not experiencing that on the preview menu, you can probably drop it down to an audio track and you'll probably experience a similar experience. Let's go ahead and see. Yeah, so as you increase the output buffer size, it becomes easier. And as you hear my spacebar smashing, it should be playing on the time. But if I were to increase the output buffer size, there's a little bit of delay, and that might get in your way. But you shouldn't have to go above drastically like I have. But sometimes this is the settings that you use in order to get rid of the latency issue, aka the delays that you experience. Okay, now that I explained a little bit more about how to get everything set up, as in putting your DAW in a position where you can arm something, and like having all the controls be set on a correct ones. Now we're going to go over to hardware mechanics and how to actually make it pick up. So first, I'm going to go ahead and connect my guitar to my audio. And so, oh, there we go. So let's go ahead and do this first. And then so my quarter-inch TRS, and I'm gonna put it into the audio jack. And now this button allows me to actually preview the track, and it's in here with my guitar. Let's go ahead and turn up the volume. So sometimes your device won't exactly let you preview the track like mine. So for example, if I were to turn it off, you can only hear it through the microphone that I'm using to speak on, or if you press that, you can hear it straight into the studio monitors. As you can see, the bar is picking up. And so what's really important is there is a phantom power that I am using, and there's a stereo pan. And now it's only showing one signal, meaning it's only one side. Most of the audio interfaces should allow you to record in stereo. So let's go ahead and go back. Now I have both signals. So next thing we're probably going to need to do is adjust the gain. So if I were to have it all the way off, a little bit picks up, but as we increase the gain / preamp, it allows us to make it a lot louder. So now that we have all the settings and routings correct, let's try to get some audio picked up on Ableton. Let's create a track by pressing Control T, or on Mac you press Command T. All right, now let's go ahead and rename this to guitar. After that, you would go ahead and press in, which basically means that you are inputting the external audio into the track. As I've moved my fingers, there's a little bit of audio being picked up, and as I'm sliding my hand around the guitar, it also picks up the noise. So let's go ahead and go and try to strum it. It's a pretty clean, weak signal, but we still get that in there. And to arm the track and to prepare to record the track, you press this button on the right, and make sure that you're actually creating an audio track, because the difference between a MIDI and an audio is when you're pressing this, you're controlling the MIDI, yet on the audio track, we're trying to record it. So as you press this and then press record, you are basically ready to go. To discuss a little further about volumes, make sure that you're not going too much. So for right now, this looks pretty good, but if I were to turn up the gain a lot more, as you notice, it just gets really, really loud, and it's really not good to the ears, nor is it good for any audio production. So make sure that you're still in the green and maybe a clean signal. It's pretty good around there. All right. So now let's go ahead and try to record some things. You would basically arm the track and press this record. And my Ableton does 2 different counts, which you can go ahead and change in preferences here. You would go into record, warp, and launch, and under count in, you would select 2 bars. So it'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, record. So that's how it would work. So let's go ahead and try that. I'm gonna go ahead and mute my audio real quick, and I'll go ahead and demonstrate. Okay, I didn't really know exactly what I was getting into, but I just kind of like made it on the spot. So the purpose is so that like you can actually see how it records and what it looks like on the audio form. Now the issue is the playback. Now when we press spacebar to play it back, you would expect the audio to play, but it won't. The reason being is because when you're putting an input into the track, it actually changes the mode of the playback for you when you're trying to listen back. So the one way to work around that is to create another audio track. Once again, Control T or Command T if you're working on Mac. And then what we would do is basically take that audio, recorded audio from the source of the track, and then drag it downward. Great. So that's basically how you would record any type of audio track, whether if it's microphone or guitar. And for once again, for this instance, the video is about recording a guitar track. So now that we have this guitar track, as you can see, it's quite quiet. But what we can do is we can either use this volume to increase the intensity of it and like the volume, or we can use this, but however we're already at 0 decibel. Maybe you can use like external not external, but audio effect and plugins so that you can actually amplify those sounds a little more. So this basically wraps up all the things I wanted to talk about, how to get yourself going to record something, whether if it's an instrument or a microphone. On the next lesson, I want to give you a lesson about how to actually tame those sounds together, equalizing it, maybe compressing it, and describe about the reasons why I would do certain things on an EQ or a compressor or a limiter. So until next time,